Today I want to talk about editing, what it is, what it isn't, who editors are, what they do, what they don't do, and dispel some of the myths that I've seen floating around the internet, some of them for years. So put your thinking caps on, kids. Let's talk about editing. Hey there. Welcome back to the channel. I'm John Hartness. I'm the founder and publisher of Falstaff Books and the author of multiple ongoing series, including The Black Knight Chronicles, Quincy Harker Demon Hunter, and Bubba the Monster Hunter. I've written and published 42 books, as well as edited multiple anthologies, and I'm also a freelance editor, as well as my work for Falstaff, where I've edited dozens of novels over the past 15 years. And today I want to talk about editing and editors and maybe put to rest some of the myths and misconceptions. I know, easy for me to say, right? Some of the myths and misconceptions about editing, and just kind of clear up some of the things that could be confusing. First off, what is an editor? It's not just the person who goes in and fixes all your commas and all your typos. That is one thing that editors do, but it's not the only thing. A good editor is a partner in the book creation process. They provide feedback, they make suggestions, and they help you polish your book until it shines. And a good developmental editor will help point out things that could be pitfalls in you selling the book. An editor can point out character flaws or characterization flaws that audiences may react poorly to that you just can't see. An editor is a partner. It's not a subservient role. It's not like you're hiring someone to trim your hedges or cut your grass. You're hiring someone to help you polish your book, and hopefully you're hiring someone that you trust and that you've vetted, that you've looked over before you got into business with them. So there are multiple kinds of editors, and not every person does every type of editorial. For example, I do developmental and line editing. I do not do copy editing. I do not do proofreading. So let's just go briefly over what those different things are. A developmental editor is the person who goes through and helps with the overall shape of the book. They help you with characterization. They help you with plot development. They show you where the holes are, what pieces need to be shored up in your book, and they help you polish the rough edges off. Your developmental editor is not looking at your grammar. They're not really looking at your word choice or your consistency of language, dialect, dialogue. They're not getting into the sentence level stuff. Your developmental editor is your big picture helper. They're the person that says, maybe this character shouldn't be so completely antithetical to your protagonist if they're your protagonist's best friend and sidekick. Or maybe they say, you have completely fridged this female character. And if you don't know what fridging a character means, Google it. And they'll tell you that your character should have more agency. So a developmental editor is your first round. You may not need one if it's your first book you do. But once you've gotten through 5, 10, 20 books, you may not need developmental edits. You may know how to build a book. I don't use a developmental editor for my Quincy Harker, my Black Knight Chronicles, or my Bubba books. I've written enough in those series to know how they're built, how those characters behave. I know the arc. Where I still need help and will continue to need help is in the line edit stage. Your line editor is your sentence level editor. This is the person who says, maybe not this word, or you've said this word 4 times on this page, or you start too many lines of dialogue with the word so. Spoiler, you almost certainly start too many lines of dialogue with the word so. I don't care that that's how people actually talk. It looks like crap on the page. We're not doing a recreation of how people speak to one another. We're doing a facsimile of how people speak to one another. And even when we're writing in a relaxed, more prosaic style, we're still heightening the language. So you are almost certainly using so too often to start a line of dialogue. It's probably the one note I've given more than any other in the past year or two. Your line editor is your second pass, maybe your third, depending on what kind of shape the book was in when you sent it to your developmental editor. These two runs can be done by the same person because they're working on the same thing. They're working on the frame of the book. They're building up the skeleton and the muscles of the book, and they're making sure that the structure is sound. That work can be done by one person in multiple passes. I use a line editor. I don't often perform developmental edits on the books I edit for Falstaff because I'm typically working with more experienced authors. I'm not going to tell Gail Martin how to structure a story. She's written 20 more books than I have. She knows how to make a book. But when I'm working with a freelance author, I may be doing more developmental work. But those are the first 2 runs. Next comes your copy editor, and this is what most people think of when they think of an editor. This is the person who starts fixing your grammar. This is the person who starts fixing your spelling, although let's be real, spell check is pretty solid, and you should at least run your book through friggin' spell check before you send it to anyone. So your copy editor goes through, they check for continuity, they make sure everyone's eye color and hair color stays the same, and then they are helping with your grammar, your punctuation, that kind of thing. Then it goes to the proofreader, who is another final pass on grammar, on repeated words, deleted words, filling in those holes that our brain automatically fills in as we're reading a manuscript over and over again. That's why you can't edit your own stuff. You're too close to it. You know what you meant to say, so you're not going to see those little mistakes that a good proofreader will see. That's also why your developmental and your line editor should not be your copy editor or your proofreader, because they've now looked at the book too many times and they're too close to it. So you need 3 editors. One person can handle developmental and line edits. Then another person handles your copy edits. And then a third person handles your proofreads. I highly recommend against using the same proofreader and copy editor. You can make it work if there's been enough time between the two for the editor to come back and look at it with fresh eyes. But odds are you want to get your book out as quickly as possible so you can start earning back some of this money you're spending. So you're not going to wait. So you need to use another editor. That's the rough structure of editorial. I've done a 3-part series on explaining developmental / line editing, copy editing, and proofreading. You can go back and watch those to get a deeper dive into each of those. But one thing I hear and have heard recently is editors don't really edit. Well, that's not true. And when you say that, what you say is, I don't really know what editors do. An editor does not rewrite your book. You don't hand them a rough draft or even a polished draft and get back a finished publishable manuscript. You get back something that looks like your freshman English composition essay that's been bled all over the page. You've got things X'd out, struck through, notes in the margin, and we're doing this all digitally nowadays. We're doing it in Microsoft Word. We're doing it in track changes. Yes, you have to be able to work in Word. Publishing works in Word. You can import and export out of Google Docs, but publishing works in Word. No, I don't care. Whatever your reasoning is, I don't give a shit. Publishing works in Word. So figure out how to make your book into a Word document for editorial, and figure out how to then adapt it into whatever format you work in to make those revisions. But you are going to be the one making those revisions. Your editor doesn't rewrite your book. My name's not on the cover of any of the books I've edited. It's sometimes in the acknowledgments, but not always, and I don't mind when it isn't. I don't look to see if it is. It's your book, not mine. You have to be the one to make all of the changes. You have final say on every single word in the book. And that's another myth. There's a prevailing wisdom, there are air quotes around wisdom there. There's a prevailing wisdom among some self-published authors and self-publishing advocates that traditional publishers will take your manuscript and rewrite it and send it out into the world without you ever looking at it. This does not happen with reputable publishers. There's an important word there. Take note. It does happen sometimes with smaller, less experienced publishers, but no reputable press is going to send a book out into the world where someone has made wholesale changes without the author knowing about it. And if they do, then they're no longer reputable. That's how that works. When we edit a book at Falstaff, we run it through a developmental / line edit. It goes back to the author for revisions. Comes back to the production manager, it gets sent to a copy editor. Copy editor goes through, makes their changes and suggestions, goes back to the author to accept those changes to make the revisions. Comes back to the production manager. Then it goes to a proofreader. Proofreader makes their changes, makes their suggestions, sends it back to the author. Author does all the revisions. Then it goes back to the production manager, goes to layout. After layout happens, after the book is in its final form, it then goes back to the author again for a final step. Sometimes we skip this step if the book has been really clean and if we're really tight on a deadline. I hate it when we do, but sometimes we do have to skip the page proof step. Regardless, no book goes out the door without the author signing off on every single word. So no, if you sign with a traditional publisher, they're not going to rewrite your book and make it into something you hate. They may require specific changes, and they may tell you they won't publish the book unless you make those changes. But that's different. You still have a choice. You still have agency. You can choose not to make the changes and not publish the book. That's your call. Another myth that I've been seeing is that editors will steal your work. And I've seen this for years. Well, y'all, some editors don't have any desire to be writers. And the ones that are writers have too many ideas of their own. So editors that don't want to be writers aren't going to steal your idea because they don't want to write books. And editors that are writers aren't going to steal your ideas because they got too many ideas of their own. I have more book ideas than I could write if I had 4 arms, 2 laptops, no cats sitting on a keyboard, and all the time in the world. And Gandalf's not in the room, so he may not be making an appearance in this video. I'm sorry. Maybe we can splice in a little Gandalf video right here for you. Okay, so nobody's stealing your stuff. Don't feel like you need to send an editor an NDA. It's insulting, for one thing. I had a client try to get me to sign an NDA when I was working freelance. I told them to hire another editor. They didn't, and I didn't sign an NDA. And I ended up not working on that book because after a couple of chapters of edits, I sent them a message and said, this isn't anywhere close to being ready for editorial, much less publication. And they fired me. And I thanked them for firing me and sent them back their deposit. Sometimes it doesn't work out. I hope they've done well. Haven't heard from them since. So editors aren't going to steal your stuff. We've got plenty of stuff. And the other myth I've been seeing lately is that you can edit your own book. And I've already told you some of the reason why, but you can't edit your book, your beta readers can't edit your book, and your ARC readers can't edit your book. I know successful indie authors who use their ARC readers as their proofreaders, and it doesn't work out well. Your ARC readers are not proofreaders. One, they're not trained. Two, they're reading the book because they enjoy reading your book. They're not reading the book with the eye of someone who is doing a job. There's an attention to detail when I'm editing a book that is far greater than when I'm reading a book. I could tell you way too many details about the lives of characters I've edited versus most of the stuff I read, which is out of my head 5 minutes after I finish reading it. Do not rely on your fans, on your friends, on your family, unless you're married to a professional editor, to edit your work. One, they're not going to be that tough on you. I know you're already typing a comment telling me how stupid I am and calling me a gatekeeper for saying that you need to hire all these expensive editors. Well, newsflash, sunshine, I am a gatekeeper. I'm a damn publisher. I own a publishing company. You're right, I'm a gatekeeper. I am working very hard to keep hot garbage out of publishing. So if that makes me a gatekeeper, well, lock it up. I am absolutely a gatekeeper. And it's not that I want to keep poor people from publishing their books. If you don't want to pay for editors, you can go through the process of querying, finding an agent, or querying publishers and finding a traditional publisher, and you won't have to pay a dime for editorial. You don't have to pay a single red cent to get your book published. The authors who publish with us at Falstaff pay not a nickel to get their books produced. If you don't want to do that, then you're making a choice to invest in a business and start a business. And that business is a publishing company. It might just be your name, but it's still a company. And if you don't want to do it as well as you possibly can and put a product out on the shelves that is as good as you can absolutely possibly make it, then get the hell out of my industry. I don't want you here. I only want to work with authors that are pushing themselves every day to get better. I only want to read books by authors who are either at the top of their craft or are working to get there. This is hard. And it ought to be hard because you are asking someone to give you money for the words you're putting on the page. And you owe it to them, and thus me, because I buy a lot of books. You owe it to us, the consumer, to make your work as good as you possibly can. If that means that you have to save up for 2 years to get your book edited, then get to saving. If that means that you have to barter household chores to an editor, I have a friend who bartered editorial for electrical work. He was a licensed electrician. He needed an editor and a cover design. He happened to know an editor who also did covers who needed electrical work. It was a perfect storm of goodness. He got a good edit and a good cover, and she got professional electrical work done. If you can't do that, and you aren't good enough to get professionally published by a traditional publisher, then write for practice until you get better. I'm sorry if that sounds harsh. No, I'm not. I'm really not. I worked my ass off to get good at writing. And I've worked my ass off to get better with every book I've written. My 42nd book is a lot better than my first. And I've told stories on this channel of people who wrote a dozen books before they ever got one accepted for publication. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to be in such a damn hurry. If you're out there and you're in your 20s and you're thinking, I've got this really important book that's got to be written right now, well, you can still have that book in a year or 2 or 5, whenever you can afford to have that book edited. Look, I get it. Writing a book is exciting. Finishing a book is exciting. But that's just the first step. You got to polish that book. And you've got to polish it to a sheen. You've got to make it glow before you start asking people for money for that work. Otherwise, you're never going to get a second book sale out of that same customer. So take the time. Save up for editorial. I had a friend recently ask me if I had to choose between skimping on cover or skimping on editorial, which would I cheap out on? And I said I'd sell plasma until I could afford them both. Or I'd sell stuff out of my house. I have a nice replica of Sting from the Lord of the Rings movies. Somebody could buy that and get part of a cover paid for me. You can't skimp on quality and expect to have success. Do you want to write like Patrick Rothfuss, like Brandon Sanderson, like James Patterson, like Kim Harrison, like Mercedes Lackey, like Robin Hobb, whoever your favorite writer is? Or do you want to write like the Temu.com version of your favorite writer? Because when you tell me that you can't afford an editor, what you're telling me is that you don't care enough to work hard to be in this business. And then I tell you goodbye, because I'm not interested in working with people that aren't willing to work as hard as I am. And I'm shooting this video at 9 o'clock at night after I've worked all day. So what are you doing? So those are a few of my thoughts on editing, a few myths on editorial, and a rant on why you don't get to skip editing and why I don't care if you call me a gatekeeper for it, because I am by definition one of the gatekeepers of publishing. That is what publishers are. So if you can't afford an editor, you can walk up to the gates with your manuscript and start querying and see if someone thinks it's good enough to invest their time and money polishing. But if you want to self-publish it, you need to invest your time and money in publishing. If you have specific questions about the editorial process and the different types of editorial, leave them down in the comments. And if you stuck around this long, you ought to give us a like, subscribe. Tell me what you think an editor does in the comments. And till next time, bye.